Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 42 of Depression Vacation Podcast.
42?
Yeah, we're at 42. So
the life, the universe, and everything.
I actually counted it out, and if we do an episode every week until the anniversary of when we published our first episode, which was like October 10th, that means we did 50 episodes in a calendar year. So
look at us go.
Yeah. We were sick for like 2 weeks, and there were other times we took off too, but and then the lost episode.
Yeah.
We'll never stop talking about that.
Rip.
I think you should re-record the lost episode as a bonus.
We have done, we did re-talk about some segments about it randomly again last week.
Time, yeah.
Because Shannon was like, we talked about this on an episode. I'm like, well, we did, but... By the way, if you couldn't hear that from him coming in and talking, we have Wallace, as promised, with us this week, fresh off his newest birthday.
Ahoy!
Yeah, welcome back, Wallace.
Perfect.
Our favorite podcast friend.
Sorry, Ryan.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan.
He doesn't even listen to the podcast, so.
He's on it, but he doesn't listen to it.
Sorry to literally everyone else who's been on the podcast.
They're good. We've only had good people on the podcast, too, because Liz is always a hoot. Allie, the one time we had her on, was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think there's only 4 people that... Oh, no, we had Sam on one time, too, to talk about Fringe.
Yeah. Well, Lauren was on.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Lauren. You were on the podcast at one point.
Yeah.
I don't think she listens.
Light of my life.
I don't think she listens anymore, so...
Yeah.
Or if she does, she's hopelessly behind, so...
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
Or hopelessly smitten.
Aww.
Probably not, but...
Adorable.
Yeah. Actually, Wallace, raise your mic a little bit, because, to about where ours are, and then angle it towards you. There we go. It was sounding a little low, and I want everybody to hear your voice perfectly.
Can you hear me now?
I heard you before, but now it's in...
It's more crisp.
It's in beautiful Technicolor. Do you hear in Technicolor?
I don't...
Synesthesia. That's what that's called.
Is that a real word, or did you just make that up?
No, that's a thing. That's the thing where, for example, you taste color.
I have heard. Yeah, that's where I heard
smell
that.
Sound. Like you have specific identifiers that cross over.
This is a weird memory, but when I was a kid, I was in a bank once, and I licked an envelope, and it tasted exactly like the Ren Fair smells. And it was the weirdest moment I had ever had. Well, not ever, but it was a weird one.
Yeah, Lauren will love to hear that because she's full of Ren Fair stories.
On a side tangent, when I was a little kid, I remember thinking every coin was chocolate.
Ooh, that must have been a fun time.
I got these penny-shaped chocolates from the bank downtown where I lived in New Jersey.
Oh, God.
And it must have been a formative experience because I feel like for the next year, I went around biting coins to see if they were chocolate.
Did you ever see the Rugrats episode that deals with exactly that thing?
No,
there's
actually.
There's a Rugrats episode where it's a combination of 2 different misunderstandings. One is that, as kids, all of the coins they get are chocolate, but they're also going to the mint. And they mistake that as meaning that, they're looking for a treasure trove of chocolate in...
the mint. I get it.
Yeah, and it's
That's
very, peak capitalism because you get them while they're young.
Yeah, that's how we do it. That's how we do it.
Yeah.
It's like how Members First, don't they give out piggy banks when kids open bank accounts? And they're just here, have a piggy bank.
I don't know. I've never been a first member of anything. I'm not an early adopter. I'm usually a follower against my will very late into the game. I didn't even get a smartphone until 2013.
Wow.
Because I figured it was going to change my life forever. There'd be no going back, and put it off as long as possible.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I was just poor. That was my excuse.
Same.
I was also
Same.
poor. The smartphone I got, my friend Darren actually just gave me his old, very first generation Droid. The screen was I don't know, this big, and it blew my mind. I'm like, I'm never bored again. On the train,
Right.
I can read sports stories.
I had movies on my iPod Nano. Remember the iPod Nano?
I still have one.
I had movies on that thing that I would watch in the backseat of the car. I think I had, actually, one of the movies I had on one of my iPods was Vampire Hunter D.
Is that a porno?
No, it's like an anime. It's my dad had it, and it got put on my iPod, and yeah, it was like a weird thing.
Speaking of like vampire hunters and what we had wanted to talk about earlier too, I haven't seen this movie yet, but the internet has been ablaze about the last voyage of the Demeter.
I have seen
this week.
the trailers, and that kind of came out of the woodwork, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
Like, it was not a thing and then a thing all at once.
So I've never read Dracula, but Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula actually does an excellent job of telling the entire story of the last voyage of the Demeter in like a minute and a half. And it's actually the only adaptation I've seen that's included that portion in it.
Which one is that?
The Gary Oldman one.
Okay, because I was...
Keanu Reeves with a British accent.
Well, see, it's funny that you call it the Francis Ford Coppola one. In my head, because that specific film is titled like Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I was like, is that the same one? Because I equate that movie with Gary Oldman and not quite really anybody else.
It's funny because that movie got made fun of so much when I was a kid. Like, the critic takes shots at it all the time, specifically because of Keanu Reeves.
Well,
in fact, they even, like, fresh off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Keanu Reeves is now in The Merchant of Venice. Doth a dude not have eyes? If you poke us, do we not get bummed out? If we eat bad guacamole, do we not blow chunks?
That's hilarious.
But he was also in another Shakespeare movie around that time. I believe it was Much Ado About Nothing.
That sounds right, yeah.
It was like he was in the like riding breeches, the period attire.
Well, I'm going to look up. I'm sure there are GIFs of that on the internet that I have to look up. But the Bram Stoker Dracula, like I was reading, like AV Club did like the top 25 Dracula or vampire movies in general this week, and that was number 1 on the list. And when you think about it, there's not really, like, make fun of Keanu Reeves all you want. There's not actually a bad moment in that movie, really. Like, very underrated. Tom Waits is horrifying as Renfield.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even know that was him until the last time I watched the movie. I was just like, whoever that I actually thought it was man, Josh would tell me right now. Buster Poindexter from...
Oh, yeah. Who looks very much like Tom Waits and is in Scrooged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Scrooge and
I
a few
remember
other
we
things.
had a conversation specifically about this.
Yeah.
Like 3 times ago when I was here.
I refer to him as the Stephen King because he was also on Oz for several episodes too, and he sported a haircut and glasses that looked identical to Stephen King. And so I always just sort of think of him as like, oh, graspily voiced Stephen King.
Store brand Stephen King.
And little did I know, like, I had no idea. I thought this guy was just a throwaway actor in a couple of movies I'd seen, but until Josh mentioned he was Buster Poindexter, and I looked that up, I'm like, holy shit, he's like a punk legend in New York City. That people just similar to Tom Waits. I mean, not punk, but just...
Also, Thrift Store Stephen King is actually Dean Koontz.
Oh, my bad.
No shade, because I read a lot of Dean Koontz when I was in high school.
He seems to be somebody who's just sort of vanished from, like...
He's still cranking out like 2 books a year. He's still on the bestseller list. And he has a fascinating backstory that I'm not going to dive too deep into, but I identify with Dean Koontz because he grew up in like apparently a very abusive household where his father, was a alcoholic and, did some very terrible things. And that's kind of funneled into his art. A lot of his books involve like runaway children, victims of abuse, and golden retrievers. But I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, we're not talking about golden retrievers today. But Dean Koontz is it's funny because I've only seen like one adaptation of any of his books, and it was Intensity, for like a made-for-TV movie that starred the woman from Deadwood. And I saw that a couple of times, and speaking of dogs, I always remember like she has to put on the dog suit to try to escape from... I don't even remember the plot of Intensity. That's the only thing I remember is like the guard dogs and having to wear like the special suit to get out.
I really liked quite a few of his books. Like one called Odd Thomas.
That's a Dean Koontz book. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I've seen more than one Dean Koontz movie.
Going to mention that was the only Dean Koontz book to movie that I've seen the movie. I have the book on my shelf, but I haven't read it yet.
No, it stars. What was his name?
Anton Yelchin. Yelchin.
Yelchin. Yeah.
Is he the one who died when his car backed over
himself?
Yeah,
it's like the most tragic, like weirdest death. Like he was a perfect, like wasn't drugs, wasn't like alcohol, wasn't reckless driving. His car pinned him in a garage.
Just a crazy accident. Yeah. That's a heartbreaking story. And like he had just kind of like re-entered the mainstream through the newer Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
Because he played Chekhov. And when I heard that he had died, I was pretty bummed.
He was also a child actor because, like, circling back to Stephen King, as many things do, one of my favorite Stephen King adaptation movies is Hearts in Atlantis, and he was little Bobby Garfield in that movie. Oh. And it's if you've never seen it, it's the actual story in the because Hearts in Atlantis is an anthology book. Have you ever read it, Shannon?
I haven't yet, actually.
It's a really good one because it's like an anthology book where all like. It's a bunch of different stories with main characters that are all sort of tied together to, like, they intersect with plots and different characters. Mm. Like, the story of Hearts in Atlantis does not end with that particular book. And it's also very Dark Tower referential. Mm. But yeah, Anton Yelchin was like a little 11-year-old kid in that movie, and he was so fantastic.
Aww.
Like, and then, like, years later when he grew up and he was like Odd Thomas or Chekhov, I'm like, oh, it's cool that he's like an adult actor now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, you are pretty appreciative that someone's able to find work outside of, what they were doing before. It's kind of like for me, and not from like a child actor to an adult actor standpoint. Well, I guess you could kind of see it that way, but like people who are able to break out of their franchises. So like Daniel Radcliffe, for instance, like there are some actors that because they're so famous or because they have been pigeonholed into one character that I can't see them believably as something else. Tom Hanks. And
we'll get back to Tom Hanks in a second because
I say this every time.
I'm curious as to what movie he's famous for.
It's not even about that. It's just that he's Tom Hanks, and anytime I see him in anything, he's just Tom Hanks. And
I got you.
You're also a bit of a Tom Hanks skeptic, if I recall.
I am, because
she's not on board with the Hanks.
You can't just make him every person who ever lived and expect me to be on board. You just can't do it.
Tom Hanks is Betty Ford.
Yes.
I know.
He's such a versatile actor.
No, he's Tom Hanks. There's a difference.
You mean National Treasure.
He can play airplane pilot Tom Hanks.
They're all
Tom
Hanks.
He can play
Alabamian Tom Hanks.
He's just, it's just not... You can't be everybody, all right? We're going to run out of biopic. They're going to make him Hitler.
Oh, my God. No, don't do this, Tom Hanks, please.
I'm just saying.
Because I can visually picture that, too.
Can't you?
Yeah.
Can't you?
He just has one of those faces.
I'm just telling you.
It's pretty much inevitable.
Anyway,
biopics are the only things that win Oscars now. So
yeah, I mean, it's the only thing that they're going to give Chris Nolan an Oscar for, I think.
I haven't even seen Oppenheimer yet.
I haven't seen Barbie yet, so together we make a whole person.
Great, excellent.
I've seen both.
I knew you would have seen both.
Yeah. Well, so like Daniel Radcliffe has really broken out of the Harry Potter pigeonhole for me. Like I have loved him in pretty much everything I've seen him in.
He's had a really eclectic post Harry Potter career where he's just sort of the impression I got from him is that he probably made a buttload of fuck you money from Harry Potter.
Well, yeah.
And so he can just kind of do whatever he wants to do at this point. And
which is awesome.
Whether that be Horns or Swiss Army Man.
I loved Swiss Army Man.
Or a show that Lauren keeps trying to get me to watch.
Miracle Workers?
Yeah, she absolutely loves Miracle Workers.
I loved the first season. And Ryan loved the first season. And then when we got to the second season, he was very confused. And so we haven't watched much farther than like the first episode of the second season.
That's like a Mad Max type of season, right?
That's medieval times kind of. Okay. He's the prince or what have you. But Ryan was like, I don't get it. Are they still angels? And I was like, I don't know. So I don't know how they link together at this point. But But yeah, no, I mean, I love Daniel Radcliffe. And there are a lot of actors that are very talented and famous that I can watch with no problem, but there are some actors that are just too much at this point.
Who else is in your Tom Hanks compendium?
I don't know. It might just be Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks is in a sphere all on his own.
It might just be him.
I could add a couple of actors to that for me. One actor everybody seemed to love for a while that I absolutely can't stand in anything he's in is Danny McBride.
Oh my God, I can't stand Danny McBride. But not because I can't like. The problem with Tom Hanks is I don't have that suspension of belief that it's not Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Danny McBride is just a bad actor, but I go on.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of like he basically is the same thing in every movie. And I guess it all depends. Like, if you find that kind of personality hilarious, you're going to find him hilarious in everything. But I do not. So, like, Danny, I didn't even finish watching Eastbound and Down because it just got too much for me. As interesting as the series was. But trying to think. Wallace,
pretty much any of the big comedy stars, I have difficulty, like... I have no interest in seeing most of their movies. That said, there's always an asterisk.
Yeah, there are some exceptions to the rule.
The door is always cracked open because, for example, Jim Carrey has turned into a fantastic dramatic actor.
Oh, yeah.
At least... I think
I knew that when I saw
Seven.
Seven.
Away a little bit.
So I have a fun story about the first year I was in Hollywood because I did not meet Jim Carrey at this thing, but there was like a writing like workshop thing that the tickets were like $500 a piece for, and a person I'd worked with on a show had an extra ticket and invited me to this like weekend like thing at a theater. It was called like The Gate, which was the Gate Society for Transformative Literature or something like that. And Jim Carrey was going to be the keynote speaker. Like, they were showing off his art and stuff like that. And the movie they had just released through all of their like channels had been Peaceful Warrior with Nick Nolte. So they were I don't know if you've seen that movie, Wallace. It is all psychobabble. Like, I didn't make it through 2 hours of this thing before I told my friend, I'm like, I'm just going to go home. Because it was all just sort of, and I was not quite as enlightened then as I am today, but even so, I thought it was all just kind of.
But Jim Carrey gets a pass from me for The Truman Show. And
Truman Show is awesome.
Yeah, and Eternal Sunshine.
Eternal Sunshine is like absolutely one of my favorite movies. When I was single and depressed, it was my Valentine's Day movie every single year. Because it is, like, aside from being a heartbreak movie, it is a literal, actual Valentine's Day movie. Because technically, it takes place the night before and then the day of Valentine's Day, right?
I don't remember offhand.
I'm trying to think about The Neighbor. It's like McRomance.
It's a very romantic movie, not a romantic comedy. And the other asterisk I'll put out there is I low-key hate most Adam Sandler movies.
Same.
I do not feel the same, but it's totally understandable.
No, I'm with Wallace on this one.
I tried watching one of his Netflix movies, and oh my God, was it awful. However,
I know exactly what the asterisks are going to be here too.
I can guess, but I want you to.
Gems.
Yeah, that was the one.
Is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And not just Uncut Gems. He's done a few other ones.
Punch Drunk Love is the other masterpiece.
So, like, even someone who I can't stand in a certain setting can redeem themselves with the right, like, director, the right script.
I think Adam Sandler is actually low-key, like, an excellent, excellent actor. It's just that, like, he's rightly, like, and this is why I admire Adam Sandler, despite the fact that his movies are hot garbage, but occasionally fun to digest hot garbage. He kind of has, I think, realized that the rat race of just trying to make Oscar bait movies and be a serious thespian is going to make him miserable. So he just wants to make garbage movies with his friends and have a good time.
Yeah.
Which I can definitely appreciate that. And then every 10 years or so, he'll do a Punch Drunk Love or Uncut Gems to remind people it's like, hey, I actually can do this, but I'm not going to.
Yeah, when Uncut Gems and Punch Drunk Love, I don't even think of them as Oscar movies. Like, they're just really interesting movies made by great filmmakers.
Yeah, I was talking about Uncut Gems with because I was talking with one of my coworkers is a very, like, proud Jewish lady, like a little bit on the old, like maybe middle-aged. And she talks a lot about how, like, she doesn't, like, there are periods she goes through where she doesn't see a lot of Jewish influences and culture talk in movies, despite the fact that there are lots of Jewish people in Hollywood. And I was telling her, I was like, low-key, Adam Sandler actually keeps a ton of Jewish culture in his movies. Like, Uncut Gems was another one, too, where I didn't know until that movie that the first person to score a point in a basketball game was a Jewish gentleman, which is why Jewish people love basketball, particularly.
I didn't know Jewish people loved basketball.
Yeah, it's like a huge thing with Adam Sandler, particularly, and, like, particularly his, like, it might not be all Jewish people in America, but definitely the New York City, it's a big culture thing with them.
Fair enough.
And apparently that was one of the reasons, which... and we were talking about Uncut Gems specifically, and she said she tried to watch it for 10 minutes, and it made her nervous. And I'm like, yes.
That's on purpose.
The entire movie is, like, just... The only movie I can compare it to, because I don't think there's anything else like Uncut Gems, but Leaving Las Vegas was the only movie that gave me the same sort of vibes, and it wasn't nearly as intense. It was just like depressing going down.
Well, and it falls into this uncanny valley of sorts, because a good friend of mine who's also a bit of a film snob told me that he hated Uncut Gems because he just didn't think the Adam Sandler character was realistic. And I was like, I grew up in New Jersey. That character is absolutely realistic.
Oh my God. Like, that was so, like, that's what I love about that movie. Is it so, like, because I spent 4 years in, like, middle of Long Island, which was, like, the hub of New York City, like, middle-class Jewish culture, like, everybody I went to college with had a bit of that character in them. And that's why it felt very true to, like, so many different people that I had seen, talked to, and been friends with. And that's interesting, like, going back a little bit, that's also why I really like Eternal Sunshine on another level, is that takes place in Rockville Center, I want to say, which was like maybe a 10-minute drive away from Hofstra, and like everything stylistically and like location-wise about that movie just screams Central Long Island, which is its own like particular like culture, like style and such, and so it feels very real to me every time I watch that. It's almost like going back into, interestingly enough, the only other thing I can think of that perfectly encapsulates like New York culture for how I felt at that time is The Girls TV series from HBO. I don't know if you've watched that, either of you.
I haven't, but I've heard good things.
I've watched the first few seasons of that, and then I don't often have HBO, so there are a lot of shows where I've only seen one season.
Yeah.
Or Max now, because there's no HBO anymore.
Right,
I refuse to recognize corporate rebranding.
Especially when it was the exact same fucking thing as the
I'm sorry, Elon, it's still Twitter.
Yeah, what the hell?
Like, people on Deadspin refer to it as X-Witter at this point. Like, just sort of making fun of the fact that, like, why would you rebrand something that was a staple, costing you hundreds of millions of dollars and reducing visibility?
It just...
Yeah, there's no way X is not going to be mistaken for something else.
There's going to be a fabulous TV series one of these days about Elon Musk taking over Twitter. I mean, if they did an entertaining series about Travis Kelnick with Uber, like, imagine what the Musk stories are going to be like.
I kind of don't want there to be,
Me
because
neither.
Elon Musk is a toxic narcissist.
Yeah.
Who feeds off the attention, so I kind of don't want to talk about him right now.
It really does. Yeah. It does really feel like the horse is loose in the hospital situation with Elon Musk, except the horse owns the hospital and the entire block everywhere around it.
Wait, I don't get that reference.
Oh, so do you want to explain?
Mulaney. Yeah. So John Mulaney has this bit about Donald Trump being the president. And so he says it's like there being a horse in the hospital. We don't know why or how he got there. And it's a really good bit. I'm not gonna try and
it's similar to having a bull in a china shop.
But so it's really it's funny because it's
except the horse is disconnecting.
But then the bit goes on a little without saying the bit, like
EKG machines,
and then the horse fires the horse catcher, and we're like, we didn't think you could do that.
John Mulaney.
We will not talk about Elon Musk anymore because.
Yeah, too many people are already talking about him. He just feeds off of it.
So
we're gonna cut off his supply.
I will say, just as a final, before we stop talking about it forever, I did actually, believe it or not, have a fruitful conversation with my dad about Elon Musk the other day.
Oh, Lord.
Because, and I got him to look this up, and he admitted he was wrong about Elon Musk, because he, like everybody else in that stratosphere, thinks that he's some sort of weird genius who's like a captain of industry. And I'm like, no, he inherited like $400 million from an apartheid mine that his parents owned, made one lucky bet and became, and I also explained to him why he doesn't pay taxes, is that he just keeps getting bridge loans that he doesn't have to actually pay taxes on.
Also, before we leave Elon Musk in the dust permanently, everyone do yourself a favor. Google Elon Musk's mom.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to do this.
And tell me she does not look exactly like Cruella de Vil.
Okay, now I have to know. I have to do it.
Google it.
You incepted me. Congratulations.
And a quick follow-up to the follow-up. I think that Glass Onion, the follow-up to Knives Out, did a really good job of coming up with because Edward Norton played this
Yeah.
Elon Musk.
Very thinly veiled Elon Musk.
Not so thinly veiled, but yeah.
That's why I was like very
spot on.
thin. But also, I didn't know that, like, because he had just been arrested, like, a week after I saw Glass Onion, I didn't know that Batista's character was supposed to be, oh, man, what's his name? I'm glad I don't remember his name, but he's the guy
Joe
who picked...
Rogan?
No, he was the guy who picked a fight with Greta Thunberg and then got arrested for human trafficking. Andrew something. Or
Andrew...
Tate.
Was it
it's
Tate?
Andrew Tate, yeah.
Yeah.
I completely missed this news story.
Oh, yeah, no, it was a wild thing. He, like...
He's a really bad person.
He's
Like, if you think Musk is... I don't want to talk about this person on the
super
podcast.
bad. Look it up. Do yourself a favor.
Superbad, the sequel.
No, I know.
Starring Andrew Tate. Ugh.
Yeah, do yourself a favor because he does get his comeuppance. So it might be a little feel good moment for you.
He's currently in jail in Romania, I believe.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, which of all the places to be in jail, probably Romania's. I'm not going to say it's like in the top 10. I mean, I'm not going to make assumptions about Romania, but they probably have vampires in their prisons.
Unfortunately, this did not end up being true, or maybe Romania was just like not wanting to admit this. But the rumor that was circulating for a while was this guy picked a like weird fight with Greta Thunberg on X-Twitter, and like he posted a weird video of him like eating pizza and smoking cigars, and he had been wanted for human trafficking in Romania and several other places. And the urban myth was that they noticed what the pizza shop was in the box in his response video to Greta Thunberg, and were able to track him down and arrest him from that.
That's the story that I choose to believe.
I want to believe that.
I'm choosing to believe it.
I mean, that actually doesn't surprise me. Another person I don't really want to talk about, but
the name of this episode is How Wallace and Shannon Talk About People They Don't Want to Talk About.
Actually, I kind of like that.
But
it's the Tom Hanks paradox.
That abhorrent Jason Aldean music video.
Oof.
Well, I won't watch it.
Which I will not name.
No, I won't watch it.
But there's a really fantastic. Someone on the Tic Tacs did a deep dive into where he got his stock video that he used in this.
Oh yeah, I read this on PolitiFact.
This music video, and he was claiming, all the stock footage in my music video was taken from real Black Lives Matter protests. Turns out, almost none of them were, if any of them.
A lot of them weren't even in this country. Like, yeah.
One of the key bits of footage in that music video was taken in Germany.
Yeah.
Oh, good Lord.
It was, and they were able to like track down the source of this stock footage because of a coffee shop in the background that had like some very distinct signage, and through a series of like investigative reporting techniques, they tracked it down and they found the original stock footage. He stole it. It was based in Germany.
Yeah, PolitiFact. And
he's using it as like, Black Lives Matter is bad. It's anyway.
These people are so insult. Like I was going to say, the PolitiFact article had talked about that a lot of them were, they don't know if he actually purchased them or just stole them, but available in just stock video catalogs that you can buy online. So
wow,
propaganda.
Wildly enough, and since we're on the topic of things we don't want to talk about, and I love that for us. Anyway, doesn't matter when it was, but this week I saw a Nazi in real life. It was wild.
Good Lord.
I was at the Sheets in Halifax, and I was sitting and eating lunch, and I look up, and there are a couple bikers, and the guy turns around, and on his jean jacket is a swastika. And I looked closer, and I was like, oh, his head is shaved. And then I saw other things on his jacket, and I was like, I think that's a Nazi. And so I texted Ryan, and I was like, I think I saw a Nazi. And he was like, well, describe him. And I did. And he was like, that's a Nazi. And I was like, okay, that's what I thought. So that's what happened to me this week. Pretty wild.
Yeah. Don't you love it? Nazis are...
just out and about.
Yeah.
At the Sheets.
Well, they've like something Europe would never have stood for after the Second World War. They have always existed in the United States post World War II.
Well, how do you justify that? That's the kind of thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. And this happens to me in movies too, when there's like a bad guy, and even the simplest things were like, I have a really good example of this. Grandma got run over by a reindeer when the You know what I'm talking about.
Is the reindeer a Nazi in this scenario?
No, the Nazi is
the grandma a Nazi?
No,
Where are the Nazis, Shannon? Tell us.
Is it a metaphor? Is the road the Nazi?
Oh my God. No, the redhead aunt or whatever, who's trying to sell off the shop, the family-owned shop, like where she's like, I want all the money.
Oh, is this the animated TV?
Yeah,
thing?
you know what I'm talking about.
I was gonna say.
Movie.
I was gonna be like, I do not remember this subplot from the song.
No, it's in the animated film, well loved and cherished by all. And so, but that's what I'm saying is like you have this villain who like wants to sell off the family business, or they want to, or I just don't understand people who do things to hurt other people. I just don't get it. I don't know.
I don't get it either. So
I can't wrap my head around it.
Hal, Shannon, and Wallace talk about things people do to hurt other people. Oh, that's a horrible name for an episode.
No, I think talk about things we don't want to talk about is a good one.
Specifically people.
Yeah.
It's like Danny McBride, Elon Musk, Adam Sandler, and Tom Hanks.
We've got a long
One of
list.
these things is not like the other.
Long list of enemies.
I do have a list, like a mental list. I've never taken the time to write it down, but of various people and things that I'm like, they're just too thirsty.
Yes.
Explain.
They feed on attention. So I specifically am not going to give them any more attention.
Yeah.
Not going to give them any of my mental bandwidth, not going to give them any more promotion because they don't need it. There are unfortunately too many people already on this planet who are paying them attention.
Yeah.
I am not going to talk about them.
I have a different kind of list. My list is like
A fuck, marry, kill, or
no, it's more like a list of wrongs. Like I've been wronged, and this is the list of the wrongs, and it varies. For example, like Gary's Bar in Palmyra, when they stopped doing karaoke.
I was gonna say this was the karaoke bar.
Yep, they're on my wronged list. I've been wronged.
Yeah.
Let's see. My Girl Scout troop when I was 10 years old. It's on that list. Yeah, it's a pretty lengthy list.
Yeah, there are bars like I actually feel how you feel about Gary's. I feel about Zembies in downtown Harrisburg because when we were shooting my aborted feature, like I guess this was like 7 years ago at this point, we had clearance to shoot in there, and the owner talked to my one producer about it and was cool with it. And then like in the middle, we were shooting at like 9 a.m. too. And at the middle of like a shot, he called up my producer and screamed at her, saying that he never agreed to anything. She said she was pretty sure he was drunk, and like said like horrible things to her. So as a result, Zembies is like, I'll never go in there kind of list thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the kind of thing where like, I think that to be like a small business owner, you kind of have to not piss people off, especially in smaller areas.
I mean, in this day and age, it's easier to like get blasted on a podcast, for instance, for doing something wrong. But like this was Central Pennsylvania. This was my experience growing up all the time. Like I remember one thing that scarred me as a kid was like I was really into Magic the Gathering cards like from 4th grade on. And when I was in 4th grade, I called up like just one of the shops that happened to be on Jonestown Road at the time, asking if they sold individual cards. And the guy kind of gave me a slurred response. He was clearly drunk, but I didn't really know that when I was in 4th grade. And so I asked him the question again, and it came out a little bit clearer, but I didn't know what he was telling me. And so my response was, okay, thank you, goodbye. And he screamed to me, well, kiss my fucking ass too, punk. And I hung up the phone, and I was a little jarred by it for like a minute because I was like 10 years old. And then he called back our house phone to scream at me more. My dad answered the phone, that was a huge mistake.
I love everything about this.
Yeah, like he read this guy the riot attacked, and like my dad told this story for a couple of years because like this drunk guy, after yelling at him for like 5 minutes, was like, oh, what the fuck are you, a federal attorney? And my dad was like, no, I'm a state attorney. And then he says that there was like a total pause, and the guy was like, oh, I'm so sorry, but your kid just like told me to fuck off and all this. And my dad's like, my son doesn't lie, and he doesn't use these words. And from what I heard, this guy lost his shop because he was an abusive drunk.
Well,
Like obviously this is not a good business model for staying in the business of selling Magic the Gathering cards. But like I've been, like over my life, I've encountered a lot of small business owners who just have that sort of mentality. Like this is their kingdom. They can do whatever the fuck they want.
Did I ever tell you about my first job?
AMC?
No, that was not that was like my third or fourth job. My very first job when I was 16 was at a pizza shop in Newville, Pennsylvania. That's where I lived. You know where Newville is?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a small town. It has one traffic light. And it was called Saucy's. Saucy's
That's
Pizza.
a great name for a pizza shop.
It is a great name for a pizza shop.
Saucy.
Saucy's.
Saucy.
And I was, when I was hired, there were like 5 employees, and then like there was the owner and his wife. And the owner saw himself as kind of like this Gordon Ramsay type. Like he would go off for no reason. There was one time where I went out for a delivery and one of the dishes got stuck in the bottom of the bag and I didn't realize it. So when I came back to the shop, the customer had called in and said like, hey, some of our order is missing. And the owner like grabbed the bag out of my hands, like he sees that. And I was holding it like kind of, vertical because I was like, there's nothing in there. So I was holding it like you would hold an empty pizza bag. And so the dish was like open and spilled all up in the bag, and he threw it at me and went off at me. Ooh. And like there were just by the time that shop went out of business like severely because he burned so many Newville, like I said, is a 1 stoplight town. You cannot burn very many bridges and expect to be able to still do business. Yeah. So when they shut down for good, I was one of 1 employees. And I was like the head waitress and the head delivery driver. And I was like, but it's not hard to crawl to the top of the trash heap. Yeah. And so, that was a really rough experience. And especially for me being like a teenager. And then there were like rumors going around town that he like was like the teenagers that would go to work for him, he would do like inappropriate stuff with them.
This does not surprise me, sadly.
Yeah, and
that took a sharp left turn.
Yeah, well, and then of course I'm thinking to myself, oh man, now everybody thinks that he does that to me, and I was not a fan of the whole situation. But yeah, just one day they called me and said, don't bother coming in. We have to shut down completely because we can't afford to stay open because people don't come anymore.
Yeah. Nobody wants to come anymore.
I do believe in a kind of karma.
Yeah.
Where the energy that you put out into the universe, for good or for ill, it will eventually come back to you. Yeah. People will not mess with you after a certain period of time. No, absolutely. There are many, 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 many examples of bad people who become successful in one area or another.
This podcast is about several of them. So.
Yeah.
But in my own experience, usually the bad people, eventually they do get a comeuppance. Sometimes it's not until after they're dead. Sometimes it's their legacy that gets tarnished. But eventually, if you are a toxic enough person, that toxicity will come back on you, or it'll come back on your family in some unfortunate cases. But it'll come back nonetheless. Yeah. And I don't like to talk about the people that are on my ish list, but there are a few. I like to think of myself as a very forgiving person, and I want to give people second chances. But if you prove yourself to be a toxic person, after a certain point, I don't confront you. I don't argue with you. I don't fight with you. I also don't spread the word about you necessarily, unless you're like a physically or sexually dangerous person. I have given people
the
a warning
up.
about those kinds of situations.
Well, and so I completely agree with you. Ryan and I had a situation recently where we had to end a friendship. Yeah. And like you said, there was an incident that had occurred 8 months prior to us finally deciding to end this friendship. And the incident had occurred, and I thought to myself, you know what? It's more important to me to be friends with this person than to make a big stink about it. I'm going to let it go. But then 8 months later, I wasn't able to let it go, and then things had happened in that period of 8 months that had kind of built upon this particular incident, and I'm just like, there's just too much. And I never really did confront this person before going to the point of saying like, hey, we don't want to be friends with you anymore. And that person did not take it very well. And
surprise.
Well, and their response was to basically be like, how could you not talk to me about this thing? But it's about creating an environment where somebody feels that they can come and tell you about something. And I did not feel that that was something that that person had opened the door for. And then when we did confront and say, hey, we don't want to be friends and this is the reason why, no accountability, no apology, and like continuously sent us messages on messages on messages telling us how terrible we were, but had us blocked so we couldn't respond. So
can you block somebody that you can only send messages and not respond to them?
I think what they were doing was sending the message and then blocking us.
Oh.
So
I'm surprised Facebook doesn't have something like, because a block feels like a pretty like permanent thing. So if you're blocking and unblocking somebody repeatedly, I'm surprised that doesn't trigger some sort of like bullshit detector for Facebook.
Well, they stopped after a couple of days. But the thing was that like you said, sometimes it's worth going to that person and saying like, hey, this is why. I hope that you figure your life out. But so, like, for example, Ryan was the one who had said, he was like, we really need to say something to this person. And I was just going to wait until they never spoke to me again. And I wasn't going to say, I was fully willing to just, because this person was expecting an invitation for our wedding. And so I was just going to let them not get it and then just deal with those consequences. And Ryan was like, no, we need to actively say like, hey, you won't be receiving an invitation and this is why. So I mean, I guess everybody feels differently, but like I usually am the same way where I won't confront you about a thing because it's not my job to fix people.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like,
but I mean, if you want to try and but the thing is also when you go to a person and tell them, and, you know, it's hard not to take that personally, you know, if you're the other person and you know, it's hard to know if that person's going to be open to hearing what you have to say or if they're just going to be like, oh, they don't like me and shut you down.
Yeah, it's
a delicate balance, right? Because on one hand, it depends on what the offense is, right? And it also depends on how long the relationship has gone on, and it also depends on like what have they shown you in the past.
Right.
Yeah.
Are they? Because absolutely, all of us make mistakes. You know, all of us, you know, show the worst parts of ourselves at some point. And you know, ideally, you want to afford grace to someone while they're working whatever that thing is out. But at a certain point, it's not on us as individuals to put up with anyone's abuse.
Yeah.
Like we're not. That's not our responsibility. And as you said, it's also not our responsibility to force someone to change.
Right.
They have to make that decision. And in some cases, you know, I've seen examples of this in my own life. Sometimes if you set a firm boundary and you walk away, sometimes that in itself is a kind of a catalyst for them to make that change. But you know, I've done it both ways. But I'm apt, you know, if this person's like an acquaintance and I'm not super friendly with them to begin with, they're just in my orbit.
Right.
I'm more likely to do the slow fade.
Yeah. And that's where I was headed with this person, but probably you know, when I was introspecting, is that a word?
It is now.
It is now.
Go for it. Prospect that introspection.
I'm going to introspect me some gold up in the San Francisco hills.
Well, I thought to myself, at that point, I was like, it's been 8 months since this incident. It feels like if I bring it up now, it's like out of the blue and it's awkward. And so one of the person's complaints about me bringing it up was, it happened 8 months ago, so you've been pretending to be my friend for 8 months? And I was like, no, that's not what happened. What happened was the thing happened and I tried to get over it because I wanted to be your friend, but I didn't get over it, and so it still hurts. And I'm sorry that it took 8 months for me to come to you about it, but that is what it is. And I've known this person for several years, like 3 or 4 years now. So it was like, my instinct was to do the slow fade regardless of how close I was to this person.
Yeah.
But I mean, but like you said, or like we kind of established, is that you have to feel comfortable going to someone to be able to say something to them, because like if they haven't given you a reason to feel safe, like, you know, then why would you?
Yeah. And it goes back to, I think I mentioned this the last time I was on the podcast, you know, is it kind? Is it necessary? And is it true?
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, if sometimes you do need to share with somebody, but it really, like, that impulse, it has to be reciprocated. You have to know that the person that you're dealing with is working in good faith.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it kind of reminds me tangentially of like the making amends step from like 12-step programs. Like you're not supposed to, I could be wrong about this because it's been a while since I've gone through it, but like you're not supposed to attempt to make amends if it's going to cause more harm to the person you've aggrieved or vice versa. Like so there are situations in which you should not try to reach out to that person if you've hurt them so much that like it's just not going to be good. So
yeah.
You know, and to do the inverse, if they've hurt you so much and continue to do it after you have confronted them.
Right.
Yeah, there's as emotional human beings, there's only so much like energy you can pay attention to people in a given day, week, month, etc. And kind of like the way I've gotten to it at this point is like, why waste your mental energy and your short time on this planet dealing with people that do not make you happy on a consistent basis?
Right.
So, like, all the friends I have are people, yourselves included, like, that just make me happy on a contingent basis. And, like, if there are people, because there are people in, like, any of our circles that I just, don't gel with, or maybe there is some hurt involved with something that happened. And, like, it's kind of like, I don't necessarily harbor bad feelings towards most of them. It's more like, I would rather spend my attention on people who I like and who deserve it.
Right.
And the older I get, the more I realize just how little time I have.
Yeah.
You know, so you kind of have to, like, use your energy, your time, and your mental bandwidth in smart ways.
That's actually something that I've come to grips with in a different way. And so, like, yes, that has come up in where I spend my time, especially. I've been focusing a lot more on, like, my family. By my family, I mean mostly Ryan's family, and my dad, and that's pretty much it. But anyway, but like my friends, like myself, like yesterday, you know, I took myself to go get a haircut for like the first time in like 10 months. And I was
haircut.
like, yeah. So I was like, you know, sometimes you have to take time for yourself. But way back when, if I started a book, I would force myself to finish it. But now, like this year, I have just stopped reading so many books. Like there were like 4 or 5 books in a row that I got less than 100 pages in, and I was like, this is not entertaining me, and I'm gonna put it away. And so that's been kind of liberating, and like, if I'm not enjoying it, I'm not going to do it.
It's funny because going back to Hearts in Atlantis, there's actually a really good line in that movie. Anthony Hopkins says about books, it's like, yes, all of the great authors are here at your fingertips. If you see one, give him an hour to see if he can get your attention. If not, move on to the next fella.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my teachers in middle school said this, you know, life is too short for bad books.
Yeah.
Aww, I want that on
which
something.
Which was like a valuable lesson to learn at that age.
Yeah.
And it's one that you can apply.
I wish I had that teacher.
Right?
I've wasted so much goddamn... Do you know how many times I've tried to read Wuthering Heights?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
So shout out to Ms. Person.
Ms. Person.
Ms. Person.
We love you, Ms. Person.
I love her. And I actually met up with her last summer.
Aww.
I met her in... she's now the principal of my
Moving
former
on up.
elementary school.
There are several T-shirts, by the way, for Life is Too Short for bad books.
I love it.
Yeah. So.
Well, then
Sorry,
that
didn't
means
mean
it's
to interrupt
no,
Wallace's
that's
moment.
okay. That means it's probably not copyrighted. So when I finally get around to making merch for the Depression Vacation podcast, that's going on one of our
Right
shirts.
next to well-adjusted people don't do comedy.
Yes.
So sorry, Wallace. Continue about Ms. Person.
But that lesson can apply to virtually anything.
Yeah.
Life is too short for toxic friends. Life is too short for bad movies.
Yeah.
Life is too short for inattentive partners.
Yeah.
Life is too short for Elon Musk
Yeah.
That's right.
That is 100%
and
true.
Kim Kardashian.
Life is too short to talk
and
about people you don't want to
name
talk
it.
about.
That should be our merch thing. Life is too short to talk about people you don't want to talk about.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep.
Yeah.
I have a lot of ideas in this old noggin of mine.
Yeah, we
That's
should monetize this podcast to our 35 regular listeners.
Yes.
Alas, Zombies is not going to monetize you.
Oh man,
After that remark.
it would be the
earlier.
greatest cross branding ever. Like,
Oh my God.
I can see. Al, I heard you talk about me on your podcast, Mr. Zemby. I didn't know you listened to this podcast. Yep, Zemby listens to all the podcasts in the area.
Well,
I heard you say I was a drunk, and you're right, but you shouldn't have said it. I don't know why he turned southern all of a sudden, Mr. Zemby.
yeah, hey, if that's where the character went, that's where it went.
Yeah. All of my characters tend to go there, so
Yeah.
they all become Jason Aldean eventually.
Remember before the podcast when we said we were going to keep things light this time?
This has been a fairly light podcast as far as they go.
how just engaged in satire. He is not besmirching the good name of Mr. Zemby.
Actually, I am. I'm totally throwing that out there.
I think we besmirch as a
Yeah,
hobby.
try not to get sued.
Oh no, they're gonna take away my podcast. I guess we'll just call it the even more depressing vacation. Depressing.
Exactly. I love it. More depression, more podcast.
Yeah. Well, I
I
guess
love
we were talking about movies at some point today.
Yeah, we did.
So Wallace, what's something you've seen lately that brings you joy, movie-wise?
Gosh. Oh, well, lately, so I've been watching the movies of a female director who got her start in the 70s. Joan Micklin. Oh, gosh, what's her last name?
You were not prepared.
I was not prepared for this. Well, we didn't really have a subject of
No.
for our.
It's not like this thing had an agenda or anything.
I looked up Joan McClin, and it gave me Jeannie McClin. So.
Is it spelled like McLean or is it spelled like Michelin?
Oh, Silver. It's Silver. Joan Micklin Silver.
Okay.
And I've taken real inspiration from her. So she started out as a journalist, actually. She worked for a bunch of like alt weekly newspapers. For a while she worked for the Village Voice. And she always wanted to make movies. She wrote several screenplays, and of course, given the institutionalized, misogyny and also anti-Semitism, she is Jewish. Was Jewish because she died a year or two ago.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like she converted to something else.
No,
But no, she died.
I mean, as far as I know, I think she died a Jew. But
Oh.
yeah, but because of all those
It's like
things,
she was Jewish
that
the last time I checked.
we met for brunch all the time.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
So she did a bunch of screenplays. She got one. She managed to sell one to Hollywood, but it never got produced.
Yeah.
And she just kept banging her head against a brick wall, trying to get some kind of movie made. And after doing that for a period of time, she just decided, well, F it, I'm going to make my own movie. And her movie, which is a unsung masterpiece, and I'm contemplating making a YouTube video about it because I love it so much.
Tube away, Wallace. Do.
I have actually I've been quietly piecing together plans to do some explainer videos in my free time.
This could be a career for you. You
I
have a great
watched-
explainer voice too. So.
I watch that kind of stuff all the time. What's the channel I watch? Found Flicks. You're familiar with
No.
with him? He does a lot of horror movie explanations and things like that. I was watching his for The Menu because I just watched The Menu. So some movies that have more like ambiguous endings, I tend to go to him, and he does a really good job kind of explaining things. And
So this might be a preview of what you can expect on my YouTube.
Oh. I will subscribe the shit out of this channel.
I think you already do subscribe.
No, I thought it was going to be a different channel. So I already subscribed. So I'm already there. Yeah.
You're ahead of the curve.
So the movie Hester Street was her debut film. She self-financed it and self-distributed it. It is a black and white historical drama set in the Yiddish community of New York in the turn of the century, in 1900, about a young woman who comes over to America after her husband had already been in America for a year, comes over with their son, and realizes that while she's been away, the husband has been shacking up with all sorts of women.
I knew that's where this was going.
Coming.
Yeah.
And it is this most of it's half of the dialogue is in Yiddish. It's in black and white. It is the least marketable film ever.
Very specific target audience.
And yet it is such a sensitive portrait of this relationship, and such a beautiful evocation of a time and a feeling, an emotion of kind of being unmoored from your community, not being able to trust your husband, not knowing what your future will look like if you get a kind of ritual divorce.
Yeah.
And it's got several incredible performances, including Carol Kane, who you probably know mostly from comedy.
Carol Kane is one of my celebrity crushes.
Yeah, Carol Kane is the lead actress in this movie, and she is fabulous.
I don't know if I've ever seen her as a lead in anything, come to think of it.
Well, and she got nominated for an Oscar. This
really
super low-budget movie managed to become a big enough hit that it was on Oscar's radar. And Carol Kane, I think I don't know exactly who she was up against, but in my book, one of the great all-time performances. And Joan Micklin Silver is really I think a role model for any independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
Because she ran her head up against a brick wall repeatedly, could not get anything made in the studio system, and just said, F it, I'm going to make it myself. And then she made a bunch of other movies that I've gradually been watching, and not all of them are masterpieces, but I really admire her sensitivity that she brings. Most Hollywood movies don't deal with these issues in quite the complex and compassionate way that she did. Her follow-up to this movie, which it's right in my wheelhouse, is about a newsroom and all the intersecting lives of the various reporters and editors against the backdrop of a corporate takeover.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What
really.
year did this movie take place in?
1977.
So this was way before this became, in the 90s, a horrifying reality for most newsrooms.
Yeah, right? She was very prescient, and I love her. I've only seen 4 of her movies now, but once I started watching her movies, I was like, oh, I'm actively seeking out more of her films because I just love her.
Joan Micklin Silver, everyone.
Yeah.
Something you had said too, kind of reminded me of a conversation I just had with my friend Steve Okawa, who was one of my you've met him I think once, Wallace, and he's one of the only friends I still keep in touch with college. Because I was looking over, oh man, I think it was The New Yorker or Vogue or something. One of the magazines just recently put out a list of the top 25 film schools in the United States, and Hofstra was 25. We barely cracked the list, but we just made it there. And I was talking with him about that, and he was sort of saying, when you think about it, we actually had the worst moment to graduate from film school because we shot exclusively on film for the entirety of our time there, which was really expensive. We had to drive into New York City and buy it from a lot of Hasidic Jewish gentlemen at B&H, and then get it developed across town someplace else. And it was breathtakingly expensive to shoot a 5-minute movie. And as soon as we graduated, he was like, it was all obsolete immediately. And I'm like, well, yeah, the feature I shot the year after, not even a year, but 9 months after we graduated, was all shot on digital. And he's like, yeah, think about that. We spent 4 years in a liberal arts college learning film, and it was instantly obsolete the second that we graduated. So we graduated in a bad time for film in general, which I disagree with that because the advent of digital has made everybody who's interested enough to be a filmmaker, for better or for worse.
Well, and I tend to think that absolutely, like a lot of success, and no one ever wants to really say this, but a lot of success is about luck.
Oh my God, yeah.
But
No,
it's
that's
also
true.
about persistence. Mm-hmm. You know, in if you really want to be successful, part of that is you have to stay at the thing, whatever that thing is, until luck kicks in.
Well, yeah.
And most people don't do that. Most people don't let luck kind of work its way in.
In order to inflate your ego a little bit too, like what we were talking about with Steve as well, like because I did not know a lot about how to actually produce movies, or like I knew shot composition, but I didn't know the technical aspects of it. Like when I graduated, and it was all like on set like training, which was rough. But I also was mentioning to Steve, I'm like, my friend Wallace didn't go to film school at all, and he's been keeping at it the last couple of years, and some of his movies are like breathtakingly beautiful. Like I still think about the opening sequence of Return to Me all the time because that looked like a real like produced Hollywood feature, like with Lisa roaming the hills. I can't explain it exactly, like why it looked so good, but just looked incredibly cinematic. And I was thinking about that in context of film school. I'm like, yeah, Wallace just learned how to do this like doing movies. So pretty much, we wasted our lives going to film school a little bit.
Well, I don't think anything's a waste. Whatever you experience, not to deny your, I don't want to undercut your
Take the
view
compliment
of yourself, but I don't think anything we do is wasted because we learn something from it.
I don't know if this guy is particularly your cup of tea, but there's a fantastic documentary he made about himself, no surprise, on Kevin Smith called Clerk that like kind of details, because amazingly like he did record like on like low grade video cameras a lot of his experiences going to film school, growing up, and just like before he even made Clerks. He had all of these videos that he made for like his parents and stuff like that. And it really is a beautiful independent filmmaker story because like he had, I think Kevin Smith, for like whether or not you like his movies, I think he has the perfect perspective on the importance of what is actually important in filmmaking and what is not. And he went to film school in Vancouver for about a year. And then what he said he did was he realized that like he was never going to be a technical person. Those weren't his things. He was more of a relationships person. So he met Scott Mosier, who was his producer. He met a couple of other people who knew how to do things. He got this band of brothers essentially together, and then he dropped out and then went back to Jersey to just make a movie to try to make it big, like utilizing all the relationships that he'd made, because he said he thought that was the real like goal of film school, wasn't to necessarily learn things, but to get the right people on your side so that you could execute things. And that's kind of what I think about with my film school experience. Like, yeah, I didn't really learn anything, but I made the right, like my friend Darren, who shot my first 2 features, was, without him, they never would have gotten made because he did focus on the technical side. He made fun of me a lot for not knowing the technical side, but was a good friend and was good to get things done with. So I think it's all about the friendships we made.
Yeah, and like Joan Micklin Silver, so I went really deep down this rabbit hole.
I can tell.
I pretty much need to do a explainer or opinion piece about
Maybe you
her.
write a biopic about her.
Yeah.
But she also, like, she didn't go to film school, and she kind of just learned by doing, and also, bring people in as her collaborators who did know.
This seems to be the story of like every great independent filmmaker, was they just sort of figured it out on their own.
Yeah, well, and Werner Herzog, he famously stole his first camera, although knowing Werner Herzog's like penchant for just lying.
It was not the significant camera.
There's a good chance that he lied about that.
Werner Herzog has never struck me as a liar. He just seems to be like have you heard the story about
He's
how
a fabulist.
Yeah. Did you hear the story about how he got shot one time?
I did.
Yeah, it was not a significant bullet. But I'm trying to, like, these are all sort of did you ever see Dolomite, out of curiosity?
Was that the one with Eddie Murphy?
Yeah, as Rudy Ray Moore.
Yeah.
That's sort of the direction that went in, which I was not expecting at all, sort of became like an independent filmmaking love letter, because they were showing Rudy Ray Moore making all of the blaxploitation movies. And like, of course, in the 70s, as a black leading man, not easy to get your own movies made. So he just did it himself. And like, there was a beautiful love letter to independent cinema in the back half of that movie, which really warmed my heart. And I was not expecting that from Dolomite Is My Name, but that's one of my favorite movies. And of course, American movie. Like, I'll always sing the praises of that is the most important movie about filmmaking, I think, ever made.
And one of the beautiful things, as much as I harumph about the Tic Tacs and the internet, on one hand, there's so much noise in the universe, and there are malignant voices out there spreading ill.
Oh, yeah.
But on the flip side of it, we've managed to democratize a lot of the discourse such that an independent filmmaker can do anything. Anything's possible. You have the distribution channels.
Return to Me is actually a good example, because that's up to like 80,000 views. Is that it? Or
no, not quite that.
Okay. But like in the tens of thousands.
I think it's almost 30,000 now.
Which is so amazing, because I assume you didn't do anything to like inflate the algorithm. I don't even know how you would do that.
I don't know. I mean, I did a couple things. Like, I made sure it had a decent thumbnail.
Oh yeah, I always do that for mine too.
I added a polished description to it, but I did that for all my videos. Mm-hmm. So I don't. But we have that means now, and no matter what you're doing, like even stand-up comedy, you have the means to like record yourself and distribute it and find an audience, even if it's weird, eccentric. There's an audience for anything. You just have to go out and find it.
There's one comedian whose name I will not reveal on this podcast who has told me several times. He is not who I would consider to be a good comedian in our circles necessarily. And he says that like videos that he posts of himself online get like tens of thousands of hits. And I'm kind of like, oh, at first because I believe everybody at first. And I'm like, well, that's depressing. And then other people were like, oh, that guy is so full of shit. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess he probably is full of shit.
Well, and not, I sound like a fortune cookie, but that old thing, like, comparison is the thief of joy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know? It's not worth comparing yourself against anyone.
I agree with that, and it's just like it seems to like in any arts field, you just run into a lot of competitive people for whatever reason that they want to win improv or win stand-up or something like that.
You don't win art.
No, not real. In fact, this has been again like. If I had one thing that people complain the most about VidJam, it's that I didn't win an award. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of like, dude, I never win awards. This isn't about that. It's about making a movie and seeing it on the big screen with your friends. Like that's, in fact, there have been a couple of times where the discussion has come for the open screens and for the VidJam screenings of being like, oh yeah, and we can just like have it at the Hit or something like that. I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like the main prize of everybody finishing a movie is getting to see it in a real movie theater with their friends and like a real audience of people. Like that's the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the draw of it.
Yeah.
Not just the draw, but like that's where you build the community. That's where you get to see it as in like at the last open screen that we went to, you played, was it Herd? Was that the name of the movie with Paul?
Yeah.
The first time I think we've talked about this before, but the first time I saw that movie, I did see it like on a laptop because I was doing the judging for it when I was at work. And I didn't get it at all. The sound design just did not work with that laptop. And then seeing it in a theater, like as it was intended to be seen and heard, 100% different movie. And I was like, wow, this is actually very beautiful. Like the bad sound of my laptop completely ruined what was a very auditory, by its own title, movie. So seeing it in a theater is very, very important, I think, for all of the independents.
And shout out to the theaters that have hosted these competitions. Midtown Cinema and Midtown, they let me shoot part of the collaborative film there.
Shout out Rachel Landon,
and
right?
Rachel, Rachel kind of pitched in and acted in it. So like, we have a nice community, and I think that is like Harrisburg, like the arts community. It's such a warm and welcoming place for the most part. Like you can find nasty people anywhere.
Yeah.
But this community in particular, I think the vast majority of the people that I've met have been good, kind-hearted souls.
Yeah, I feel like for whatever reason, like maybe it was like the organization role I had in VidJam, I dealt with all of the nastier people for years, and it's been an interesting lesson because I used to react not so well to like just having to constantly deal with some of the nastier people, not just with like movies or like other things, but as sad as this sounds, like after years of dealing with them, you kind of just get used to it and you learn exactly how to deal with that kind of a person. And it's like you say, just do not let them get your emotional energy. Don't really talk about them or things like that, because like I used to get so hung up on certain people, like, oh man, this guy's just being such a jerk to me and I can't let it go. And I think, Wallace, you said to me a couple of times, it's like, don't fret about this. Just, let it go if you can, sort of.
Let it go, let it go. Well, the one in particular that I know about, and I never had any. I had a run-in with him, but only in a glancing sense. Like he made a snide remark at me, and I was just like,
if this is who I think it is,
I just brushed that dirt off my shoulder.
I thought you were brushing the dirt off the other shoulder for a second.
Cough break. He left.
Yeah.
Again, the problem resolved itself.
Well,
that was a nasty person who brought a weird energy to things.
Yeah.
And he didn't win anything, was kind of nasty about it, and he left.
I was actually thinking about this exact person, assuming we're mind melding here, when we were talking about Zembies and the pizza place, about like, because you are right, Wallace, there is some sort of karmic retribution in that, like, eventually this person ran out of people who wanted to work with him. And I've heard that from a couple of different people in the community. And they had exactly the same attitude as you. It was just like, it's like, oh yeah, that guy burned another bridge. Cool. We'll keep making movies and doing our thing. So, and like it definitely is an acquired skill, just learning how to deal with people that exhibit bad juju, as you were saying, in bad faith too. Like plenty of people can exhibit bad juju for a variety of reasons that are like, they're hurt or they're having bad reactions to things. I'm actually very guilty of this myself a lot of the time, that sometimes I will act poorly just as a bad reaction for certain other things. Mm-hmm. But the people who don't like act in good faith are the ones you want to stay away from.
Yeah, I was thinking about, Wallace was talking about the term karma, and I feel like, when we use the word karma, a lot of people associate like this kind of cosmic, like universe, universe, like somebody out there is like balancing the scales. But I think that when you think about karma, if you think about it really from like the perspective of consequences, like when someone is treating you poorly, you kind of internalize that and you forget that that's probably how they treat everybody.
Yeah.
And honestly, like what we see as karma is literally like the consequences of thine own actions. It's just like if you continuously treat people horribly, people will not want to interact with you anymore. And that's kind of that comeuppance that you're talking about, is like eventually it's gonna shit on you.
Yeah.
You're just not going to walk away from that completely unscathed. So
it just sort of boils down to like, if you have the option to be kind, be kind.
Yeah.
Because, why not? Really, it takes maybe even less energy than being a dick. So just try to be kind where you can. So it's not always possible because we're all emotional beings. For better or for worse, we do not make the right decisions all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, except for me. That wasn't even funny because it's not even close to being true.
When you said emotional beings, my brain went emotional beans, and then I just thought of a bean that was very sad. And that would be kind of cute on a t-shirt.
A crying burrito with rice.
Emotional beans.
But if there's a sad bean, there's probably also a delightful bean.
Ooh, some happy chickpeas could make happy hummus, for instance.
Oh, I love it.
Oh, those are
I
peas.
love happy hummus.
Happy hummus. You could put happy in front of anything and it rebrands it as a good thing.
Totally. All right.
Except for Nazis. There are no because you saw a Nazi at one point.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know. He looked like he was having an okay day.
Yeah. So Wallace, do you have anything coming up in the next while that you'd like to talk about until we have you back on again?
Well, my world is just over full. It's brimming with good things.
Oh, with good things. Okay.
The next thing that is going on is the LGBT Center.
Oh yeah.
Has its new home. I serve as the board co-chair with Tawanda, and we after kind of losing our previous home, for the center in Harrisburg. I didn't personally buy it. The organization bought it, but we bought our new home.
Aww.
And there's going to be an open house.
Yeah, David actually told me that he wandered into one of your open houses a little bit ago.
Yeah, well, that was actually a function that we held for some of our donors, and I saw David Payne, who I love. I saw him through the window.
That's what he said too.
and he paused. He was with his partner Chris, and he paused to kind of look at the place because he's heard about it from me previously. And I saw him through like the solarized windows where you can look out but no one can look in. I was like, wait, that's David, and I ran out there and gave him a quick sneak peek of the LGBT Center of Central PA's new home.
That's good work you do, Wallace. So thank you for your work.
Well, I want to say, if anyone who wants to come out and support us, we are in the middle of a capital campaign. If you've got some extra cash lying around and you want to send it to us, we do all sorts of good work in terms of mental health and housing programs, especially for the LGBTQ people who are kind of facing the worst of discrimination right now. We help people stay housed. If they lose housing, we connect them with resources. But we'll have a soft launch for our new headquarters on this coming Friday. That's August the 18th at 1323 North Front Street in Harrisburg during 3rd in the Berg. So come on by. If you're able to donate because it's a great cause, if I do say so myself.
It is.
And come out. We'll have food. We'll have beverages, and you can tour the new center.
Something
That's
like
great.
What you were saying about housing actually reminds me of I don't know if you follow any of the homelessness conversations in the Midtown Harrisburg group or anything like that. But something I hadn't realized until I saw a lot of homeless people posting about that in there is that Our Daily Bread, especially Bethesda Mission and a lot of the religious-based places, it's not a no strings attached, come in. You're forced to do Bible study or...
Actually, I don't want to misspeak, but I think Our Daily Bread does offer probably most of its services.
Okay, that is a good distinction.
I can't guarantee everything because I don't know exactly, but I do know people who work at Our Daily Bread. I don't believe you can go there and get food at a minimum without having to buy into the religious side.
I definitely don't want to misspeak, and I'm going by the word, obviously, of the people posting in this group, but I didn't realize that was a component for some of these places. Because I worked at the Cathedral Homeless Shelter in high school, which was only one night a week. It was only on Saturday nights. And I didn't remember them forcing anything like that going on there. But again, it was only one night a week.
Yeah, and I can't really speak to Bethesda Mission, for example, because I haven't covered them in a long time, and I don't know the people who run them. But it is a really tough time for housing, period.
Oh my God, yes.
Because I'm sure you've heard from even some of our friends who are facing difficulties staying housed just because rents have gone up by incredible amounts, and even if you have the wherewithal to buy a home, it's difficult to buy a home right now.
Yeah, Lauren's been looking for an apartment in Harrisburg. I really feel the entirety of the year, because she was going to be in a place in January that canceled out on her at the last second, and since then it hasn't been it's casually, intensely looking for housing here and there. And some of the places she's looking at are ungodly expensive and also not in good neighborhoods at the same time. So it's I do not.
Yeah.
If you're looking for housing right now, you have my sympathies. And
Sure. Yeah.
And that's why LGBT Center, one of our big programs is Emergency Housing Fund, because quite a few LGBTQ people end up on the streets. There are lots of cases where their family doesn't accept them, and they toss them out.
Yeah.
Or they were sleeping on someone's couch, and that for whatever reason that didn't continue. And that's something that we see. And quite honestly, we need to be doing more to kind of bolster our kind of support network for people. And not just LGBTQ people.
Just all people.
Anyone who's low income right now.
Yeah.
It's really hard out there.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing awesome work with there, so thank you, Wallace.
Thank you, Wallace.
Yeah, and we have like a minute and a half. Do you have anything you want to plug, Shannon?
I don't have anything coming up. No.
I guess I don't really have much coming up either, although Wallace and I are restarting 2 of our dormant improv teams for the next season at the Harrisburg Improv. I almost said Harrisburg Improv Center, the Harrisburg Improv Theater. One of which is Offbeats, which is our musical group that we did for 1 season and then Hal submitted too late for this season. So we had a season off to reassess. But the other one that's coming back was our improvised reality show, The Real Fast Coast Wives of Central Pennsylvania. And I'm kind of excited about this, Wallace, because this was a group I thought died with the pandemic. And then as an offshoot for like the hits, like big hitstravaganza every year, they were taking submissions, and I was kind of like, would anybody want to reunite for a one-off show? And we had an awesome show, I thought. And so, like, we're going to get back together with some new wives.
It is such a fun show. And, you know, for anyone who may not know what it is, why don't you explain the premise?
As quickly as possible and as easily as possible for non-improv people. It's like we all play the same character throughout the course of the show. And the hook is that we all auditioned for other reality TV shows, and they just threw us all into one, like, throwaway show to get rid of us. And so we're all interacting with each other within. And then every scene, the framework of whatever show we're doing changes as we spin what's become the VidJam wheel with a list of suggestions for shows like Sister Wives, Catfish, Naked and Afraid.
I like it.
That becomes the framework for the next scene between 2 characters. So
Nice.
yeah, so hopefully, I think it'll be a good time. It's a fun show with good vibey people, and I want to do more around the hit because I was barely there this year. So yeah,
All right.
thank you, Wallace, for coming and talking with us, and hopefully everybody out there, you're having a good day, a good week, and everything's going okay for you. And we'll see you next week. And I've been Hal.
I've been Shannon.
And I'm Wallace.
And thank you all, and have a nice week.